3 weeks after AN7 first exposed the rotten treasury, people have finally started noticing the deafening silence on the matter. The manner in which opposition, NGOs and mainstream media have ignored AN7's hard-hitting expose is becoming more apparent by the day. The damning internal audit report on the irregularities in the Treasury's integrated financial management system and PMO project has made rare headlines. Hard facts, incriminating numbers, damning observations, all sidetracked. What has donned the spotlight in headlines are unsubstantiated draft emails. Instead, the content of these emails is yet to be authenticated. But every publication has given prominent coverage to these in their reportage. Now, here's a look at what the Treasury's internal audit report revealed. A total of 54 IFMS financial processes were flagged in the audit report, which took into account transactions between March 2014 and August 2015. 49 of those processes were found to be catastrophic. 5 other financial processes were assessed as high-risk. Audit found no business case for formulating of IFMS project management office, no budget information and no budget breakdown was available per financial year. Monitoring of the project costs were lacking a formal independent quality assurance function was found missing. Payment registers were incomplete. Project management office expenditure was excessive, ineffective. Resource management undefined. Purpose, scope and objectives of payment procedure and inadequate delegation of authority for payment procedure were the other pointed out by the report. And now joining me in studio is Yamkela Spengane, a Black Consciousness political activist. He is joining me in studio. A very warm welcome to you and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening to you and the viewers at home.
And now, what do you make of the Gupta emails coming to the fore only after the Treasury internal report that was exposed by AN7?
Well, it's very tricky that the leakage of the emails goes hand in hand with the leakage that comes from the National Treasury, and one is taking headlines and page spreads all over the other media houses, and this one has been driven by one particular media house. Therefore, knowing media to be very impartial for the most part, we could say that these were meant to dampen down any traction that could be gained by this expose, seeing that these emails are specifically targeted to go hand in hand with proving that the state capture exists as is defined by the media, and also to prove that there's a corrupt linkage between the Gupta family and President Zuma, with whom there's a pending no confidence vote awaiting the decision from the Constitutional Court on whether it will be by secret ballot or it will be carried out by a show of hands in Parliament. So there's a particular alignment and leakage, and it's unfortunate that these emails have no source as to how they got to the hands of the people that are now publishing them, how they got them. Was it legal? Was it illegal? Can it be evidence that is used in court? And if so, why hasn't anyone opened a criminal case against people who are implicated by these emails? And here we are. We have a story of corruption to the worth of 4.4 billion rand in the National Treasury over several number of years and under 2 previous finance ministers. And we need to actually know why this report, because it's for the financial year 2015-2016, why was it not released? Why did the public not know anything about it until recent times? Yet no one seems to be taking heed of that particular matter, and it's quite problematic. And we can say that we clearly see that there exists a media bias in the country that needs to be addressed, because we can cannot have media as propaganda machines being in a democratic state where openness to information needs to be something that carries out the decision for the voters to take in accordance to what is done to manage their own fiscus, what is done to manage their own interests as the citizens of the country.
And could we see more of the sidetracking taking place? Looking at AN7 already exposing this 2 weeks back, and only now it seems like people will try and say something now that we're having this discussion in studio.
Well, even the publications outside AN7 that have taken some time to speculate, it's just been an article online here and there. I saw something on Media 24. I saw something, I think it was on Huffington Post that was resharing the Media 24 post. So no one has actually come to the field and actually investigated what the story is about. And therefore, we are looking at a case of a clear ignoring of this particular headline. That is actually quite imperative to say, okay, if we are reporting about particular issues, then we must cover all issues of interest or all politically motivated headlines that are affecting the country. But here we see an obvious bias as to what kind of headlines the public needs to be, are made aware of, and which ones are held back from the public and from public opinion to be scrutinized, because they will put certain individuals or certain chain of propaganda in bad light, because there's no balancing of scales as to how the headlines are directed and put up into the public space.
Now, people have come out saying that AN7 is the elephant in the room and a source of all the political problems in the country. What do you make of this?
Well, it would be very problematic to label any one media house as the source of political problems in the country, because media by its own existence has never been impartial. We have a problem of media and partiality or impartiality from time immemorial, from the inception of media itself. One Mark Twain once said that if you read the newspaper, you are not informed, rather you are misinformed. But if you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. So media partiality or impartiality is not something that's sovereign or guaranteed. And there's no media house that can claim to be the mouthpiece of all impartial and all sovereignly justifiable news, because they are not known to be impartial. And therefore, any media house that's going to come and point out that AN7 or any other publication is impartial while they are not pointing themselves to be impartial, actually problematic in that they are generating a certain propaganda to blemish others while leaving themselves unblemished.
And now let me just bring in Mr. Tsepo Khadim, a political analyst. He is joining us in studio. Very good evening to you, sir, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening.
Now, Mr. Khadim, not much has been done about the internal report as yet. Could it be because it was under the department of Pravin Gordhan and his predecessors at the time when the 4.4 billion rand was misused?
Well, yeah, not much has been done yet. There's a new Director General who has been there for long, of course, in other capacities, together with the new minister who's been there for just over 2 months. We have to bear in mind that this internal report, by the way, was deliberately withheld from the public and was deliberately, it would appear, withheld from the Auditor General. And therefore, that seemingly act of concealment itself is a crime, and we can only hope that Minister Malusi Gigaba will come forth and explain as to what are the circumstances that led to the concealment of this internal audit report on an amount that is so outrageously high of 4.3 billion, but also over and above that to say, be that as it may, here is the outcome of the expenditure of 4.3 billion in the form of a product, a report, a system architecture that would have been produced as a result of those amounts. But we can only hope. But I'm not necessarily making a correlation or a nexus between the internal audit report expose by AN7 and the so-called Gupta leaks. My own assessment is that whether or not ANN7 had come up with the expose at Treasury on the 4.3 billion rand expenditure, this character assassination, this orchestration would have continued. We have to bear in mind that, by the way, it is not new. And what is, for me, very interesting and intriguing is that the people that are supposedly in possession of this so-called leaked emails, that they're saying there are 200,000 emails, they have not even told their viewers or their listeners or their readers as to, well, of those 200,000 emails, is that for the entire corporation of the Oak Bay group of companies? Did this thing come from one server? Do they all have come from one hosting account, email hosting account, or are there various? And also, you know, what were the circumstances that led to them being in possession of this so-called emails? But I think the key thing that they need to come out of is that they need to come clear on is to say, to what extent has there been any criminality that they have to date not been able to prove? If anything, I think that the media have incriminated themselves further by publishing certain details that it would appear on the face of it that they are doctored. But we must not see that in isolation. If anything, South Africans need to now be more than ever before, it must be patently clear that there is a much more bigger agenda to destabilize South Africa. There is a much more bigger agenda for regime change in this country. And that, in fact, if anything, we will see a continued onslaught and largely based on character assassination. So if anything, we have seen the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler in South Africa in the form of mainstream media, that no matter how big a lie is, they will take that lie, repeat it over and over again until the unsuspecting masses will regard it as truth. And that's certainly what we have seen. We have seen on the so-called state capture, for example, by one family. Now, I make this point, and I make it very sincerely. The economy, the GDP of South Africa is just over 4.1 trillion rand. That is economic activity. If we were now to ask, and taking into account a whole host of things, we say the declared financial results of Oak Bay group of companies are 2.6 billion rand. The whole group that employs 7,500 people. We have over 6 million, 6.8 million thereabout people who are salaried employees in this country. Over and above that, we have a whole host of other activity. Now, 2.6 billion rand in 4.1 trillion rand, what percentage is that? It is not even 0.8% of activity, not even profit, by the way. Now, if we were to dissect and say, well, could 2.6 billion rand in a 4 trillion rand activity constitute state capture? Can anybody really look South Africans in the eye with a straight face, a clear conscience, and say that constitute the capture of the state, when even out of government procurement, for example, which is estimated at or budgeted at 500 billion rand, and the state-owned companies together combined, they also another 500 billion rand. Out of that 1 trillion rand that is government-related, if you are talking about state, what is 2.6 billion rand in 1 trillion or 2.6 billion rand in 4 trillion rand? But yet the mainstream media have maintained a line over and over and over saying the Guptas have captured the state. Therefore, they fit that description I'm giving them, or the new name tag that these are Hitlerites. They are no different from the descendants of Adolf Hitler. They've taken a lie, repeated it over and over, and they are hoping masses will regard it as truth. But they bear the burden of coming clean and say, who is funding their agenda, that of really changing the minds of citizens to believe that which clearly the facts do not support.
Now, on that point, looking at how the other media houses portray themselves on getting information on issues as well as stories, why is it that none of them have attempted to get an interview from Gordon and Jonas to answer on the existence of this report, to find out if it does really exist, and will they do anything about it? What does this say about the different media houses when it comes to this expose that has taken place?
It does not fit their agenda. We have to bear in mind. I mean, let's look at The largest company on the JSE, my understanding is that is NASPERS, Nationale Pers. And we have to take into account what are the origins of Nationale Pers and who's the founder of Nationale Pers from the early days in the early 1900s. The same founder of Nationale Pers, which is NASPERS today, is the founder of the Nationalist Party. But when we take into account, this is a company with a market cap of over R1 trillion. The JSE market capitalization is well over 10 trillion rand. So now, on those numbers, who exactly has captured who? But they have got, by far, in terms of the private sector, the largest media outreach in terms of print, specifically, as well as online. Now, who is funding the stories that they publish? Why is it not incumbent upon them to stay within the truth? Now, let's look at this, for example. Henry van Vieren has just written a book on the apartheid-era crimes, corruption, as well as guns and all of those other financial sins. Nothing has been said about that book. So it's not just even ANN7, for example, or the New Age that have been relegated to the sidelines when they attempted to expose the truth. We have right here now a book that has just come out after 5 years of investigations, going through documentary evidence, not some manufactured anything, and yet those same mainstream media, they are saying very little about it. If anything, they refer to it in passing. They are not even demanding that those that are accountable must be, must be prosecuted, or those that are guilty. We see now in terms of the call for a wider or an expanded commission of inquiry into the so-called state capture, that if we were to go back to 1948, the moment you make that suggestion, we've seen even F.W. de Klerk Foundation coming out and say they are going to go to court, put the Constitutional Court in an invidious position, plead that the president is incapacitated from carrying out his constitutional duty and mandate of instituting a commission of inquiry when there's no facts that support that. The only thing is that they are so fearful. Therefore, they are spending all the money that's possible to conceal their own crimes and distract all of us by saying, here, the Guptas are the problem, when the facts do not fully support that. And of course, we must investigate everybody else, including the Guptas. Those of us who are calling for a wider commission of inquiry with wider terms of reference, but with a longer time span, is because we are interested in nothing but the truth and the truth alone. And if it so means that the Guptas themselves are guilty of a crime, they must themselves therefore be what? Be punished for the crime that they've committed. But we cannot leave out all of these other people who, after all, constitute well over 4 trillion rand of activity, which has not been answered for in any shape or form.
Let me just bring in Mr. Spengane into the conversation. Now, so looking at the facts of the report, what could be some of the reasons behind no senior politician of any party coming out to have an opinion on the Treasury report?
Well, to come out is to corroborate that the existence of this report is true. Now, no one wants to give it airtime because it is hoped that it will not stay in the headlines, it will not stay in the consciousness of the general public in helping to sway public opinion towards a particular direction, because media, as it has been carried out, is to sway public opinion and to bombard them with certain propaganda so that they can think along certain lines. Now, the happenings at Treasury that are now proven by this report, this internal audit, are now sway against that particular propaganda that the public has been bombarded with over a period of time. Now, it breaks this momentum because it says, but if these people are corrupt and the people that we've been putting in the media as saints, as saving the country, as warrior, are also implicated in corrupt activity going a while back, it simply means that we have a problem into demonizing a particular group or a particular people, while the people that we've been putting on a pedestal have also been found wanting in certain respects. And this is the sole reason why we have an issue of ignorance from people who normally call out government on corruption. They seemingly have forgotten that the treasury is part of government and that it's corrupt. And this is also fitting into what we're talking about the media bias that exists, about the propaganda peddling that exists in order for capturing public opinion and swaying it in a particular direction.
Now, Mr. Khadima, those who have been mentioned in the reports as well as some of the Gupta emails, can a case be opened for just being mentioned in a report?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to really depend. You know, litigation, and particularly in terms of the law of derelict, you have to have proof causation in terms of the harm that you would have suffered as a direct result of being mentioned in some press somewhere, and more so as a public official. So it's going to be very difficult. But I'm reading it completely differently. That the reason why some of the ministers are being flagged and mentioned is because there is this desire to control them. Now let's look at, since those so-called Gupta emails came out, we have seen an even more unprecedented pressure on one minister, Malusi Gigaba, to gazette what I continue to assert that it is an unconstitutional, and I've never been proven wrong, by the way, and I can assure you nobody will ever prove me wrong on the unconstitutionality of Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Act. But that Gupta emails thing is a ruse to then use their so-called Gupta emails to directly control the authority, the powers, functions of these various ministers, and if they do not, then what is this Nigerian grammarian tell us? They want the ministers to kowtow to their poho. And if those ministers do not kowtow to their poho, they will be punished through this unconstitutional and draconian Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Act. And that is really what we are going to see. The pressure is to be able to control the state at the center, because the judges, the legislatures, the executive, all of them are now under the control of the banking cartel. And that oligopolistic cartel of banks, they will stop at nothing to ensure that they can fully control how the state is run, who does what. And that's for that reason that they will put unprecedented pressure. They will therefore use things such as the Gupta emails, ruse, in order to justify why this unconstitutional law must be gazetted to give effect to their own state capture, which in this case is total state capture. If you can have the Chief Justice of the country's financial affairs or his ability to do his duties and functions subject to the decision and the discretion of a banking institution. If you can have the president of the country, whenever he or she has to exercise their duties, functions, and powers constitutionally, have to do so as so expressly authorized by the banking institutions. Now that is the end of democratic constitutionalism in South Africa. It is the end of the road. So the enemies of the state are those that will therefore use the mainstream media, and the mainstream media, by the way, that is so much willing to be used in order to ensure that this regime change agents and this totalitarian fanatics who want to control the state in its entirety can be able to have their way. And one can only hope that Minister Malusi Gigaba will realize that he will be the first victim, by the way. The moment he gazettes FICA, I can assure you, there will be more articles coming out that will be implicating him without any evidence whatsoever, so that whenever he executes his duties and functions as Minister of Finance, he will only do so as so expressly authorized by the banking institutions. And those are the real enemies of democracy in South Africa. So the nation better wake up to this danger, clear and present danger that is facing our nation. And certainly we are going to see more of these side tracks, but they are unfortunately an exceedingly dangerous side tracks to move us away from the real issues whereby we can achieve equity, eradicate poverty, and then eradicate unemployment for the majority of the people. But we are going to be sidetracked so that we are then controlled by this clique, which the SACP would have referred to as the bourgeoisie.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me in studio. That was Tsepo Khadima, political analyst, as well as Yamkela Spengane, Black Conscious political activist, and they were joining us in studio just discussing and further unpacking as the damning internal audit report on the irregularities in the Treasury's integrated financial management system and PMO project has made rare headlines, and the manner in which the opposition, NGOs and mainstream media have ignored ANN7's hard-hitting expose, it is becoming more apparent by the day. And now ANN7 Prime will take a short break. We'll be back with more news and updates. Stay tuned.